So the Sunnyvale Art Club has entered into agreements with local venues that we will provide artwork that is safe to hang and of a quality that will enhance their venue. And it's basically for them and their customers' visual enjoyment. So we agreed to follow the exhibit guidelines when we joined the club to make sure that our art club is safely assembled and safely hung. The main purpose is to protect the venue from maladies and mishaps caused by our members' artwork. So your presentation for the exhibit not only reflects you as an artist, but it also reflects on your fellow club members and our club's reputation. So we should be as professional as possible. So when you're hanging in these venues, you have to remember that you're not representing yourself, but you're representing 60 people in this club. So for that reason, we decided that we needed to go over the guidelines to help members know how to hang their artwork correctly so that it is safe and a good presentation for public exhibit. So the first thing we wanted to do was talk about frames and frame condition. So first of all, at the Art and Wine Festival, we required all members who were hanging to use plexiglass because the number of people that were visiting the booth, and we didn't want anything to fall and break and cause any harm or damage or injury. So that will probably be the same rule this year. But when we're exhibiting in venues, you can use glass, but the idea is maybe when at least one side of the artwork is 20 inches or bigger or larger, you want to put plexiglass in there because the heavier the art, the more apt to be unstable or to cause damage if it falls. So inspect the frames that you're going to use and ensure that they're clean and in good condition. If you see that the corners are falling apart or coming apart, or you've jammed your canvas in a frame that's just a little too small, it will fall apart. So you need to make sure that those corners are spackled, they're filled, they're sanded, and they're painted over so that it doesn't show as if you had purchased something at a yard sale and kicked it home to use with your paintings. So put your best foot forward and make sure that your canvas is in a nice, clean, well-maintained frame. Don't use warped frames. Warped frames are bad. They'll never hang against the wall, and they are a magnet for accidents. There's a warped frame. So nobody wants to look at a frame and see fingerprints on the liner. The liner is usually made of linen, and it goes right up against the frame. So it is also part of the rabbet that holds the canvas in place. So you want that to be in good condition. You don't want cracks. You don't want it coming apart from the frame, because once it's hung, I'm telling you, accidents will happen. Gravity is not your friend. So we have to be very careful that everything is in good order, and you've done maintenance and you've really checked over your frame to make sure that it's safe. I know we all buy used frames. We all look for a bargain, but we have to make sure that they're in good repair before we use them. So look for scratches, dents, broken corners, broken rabbets. If the rabbet is cracked or broken, it won't hold the canvas securely. The frame liner should be clean. Make sure that your frame fits the canvas. If I look at your canvas hanging and I can see the back wall between your canvas and your frame, it does not fit. And if I can see that, everyone who looks at your artwork can see that your frame doesn't fit, and it just doesn't give the best impression about your art. So make sure that it fits securely and that it fits well. So let's see, the corners, the miters, I covered all that. Okay, so measuring your artwork, that's the next slide. The problem we had at the Art and Wine Festival was that we asked people to measure their artwork with the frame so that we could determine where to hang them. So we could do the layout on all the panels and make sure that we had the art hanging where it would fit and leave a space between, it and other paintings around it. But it seems that a lot of people either guessed the size of their canvas or they didn't know how to use a measuring tool. So I can't teach you how to use a ruler. You're just going to have to watch a Google tutorial or something on YouTube. So just make sure that when you're measuring that you put the height first. I know when you're doing geometry or you're ordering a frame from Michael's, they ask you for the width first. Yeah, that's them. But in the rest of the world, we measure the height first and then the width. So a landscape format for a 16 by 20 is 16 inches tall by 20 inches wide. If you turn it on its side, it's 20 inches tall by 16 inches wide. So that determines the measurement of your canvas, and that is how artwork is measured. Don't argue with me, Google it. Okay.
Thank you, Mary, because I did not know that like you were supposed to, and that is the way it works in the whole art world.
In the art world, yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
If you're buying blinds for your window, it's height first, width second. If you're buying a tabletop, it's height first, width second. It's whatever. It's an industry-wide measurement formula. So the only place you don't do it is in geometry and when you're buying a frame, because we don't know why, but that's just the way it is. I can go off on a tangent on that, but I won't. So, but you don't have to have a frame on your canvas if you're hanging it. If it is a gallery wrapped canvas, it will have the staples on the back as opposed to the staples on the edge. So the canvas will come all the way around the frame and be stapled behind. If you don't want to put a frame on that, that's fine, but you have to paint the edges all the way to the back so that there's no white showing on the edges. And it should be painted either a continuance of the painting in front or a color, but not white, because white looks like you didn't paint it, and that's not the look you're going for. If your staples are on the edge, you have to use a frame because it's not gallery wrapped and it's not acceptable. It's like having your, skirt tucked into your underwear. You don't want people seeing that. So cover it up with a frame. Although nobody wears a skirt anymore, which is okay. Anyway, if it's in good condition, if the sides are in good condition and the corners aren't frayed, go ahead and paint it and leave it without a frame. If you can tuck those little frayed corners in, tuck them in very neatly, put some glue over it, make sure that the frame on your gallery wrap canvas is neat and in good condition if you're going to go without a frame. But always paint the edges. So you don't want it to be distracting. So you want to make sure that it's not going to be like a fluorescent orange or something that distracts from the front of the artwork. Okay, so the next slide. Let's see. I'll be done with this in about 5 minutes, so hang with me. Okay, so if you buy inexpensive frames, the chances of you getting a frame that is warped is very high, especially if you buy them in a pack, where they're all shrink wrapped together. Somehow, and in some instances, they can get warped from moisture. A lot of times the moisture is from the wood not being dry enough when the canvases are manufactured. Or when they gesso them, something can happen and the gesso that's run over them doesn't dry completely or what. But anytime there's moisture, there will be warping. So try, to make sure that they're not warped. There really is no way to fix a frame on a canvas that has been warped without jumping through a lot of hoops. So just make sure that when you're getting ready to paint it, that it's not warped, so that you don't have it looking like, it's leaning out from the wall trying to shake your hand, because it will shake your hand and fall off if it can. So make sure that it lays flat against the wall. When you're hanging it in a gallery or an exhibit, people won't be looking at your artwork. They're going to be looking at the warp. So keep that in mind. If it's ripped, if you accidentally get a rip or a tear after your artwork is finished, don't leave the hole and exhibit it. You need to repair the holes. In the, I forget what month it is. Oh, in the July 2020 newsletter that you can access on the website, there's a tutorial on how to repair rips and tears, and it's fairly simple. So you can look at that, or you can go on YouTube and watch a video tutorial, especially if it's one like this particular tear that's showing in this photograph, where it's a corner tear and then it rips down. There's going to be a lot of frayed canvas, and you can watch one of the tutorials to find out how to minimize that so that it's not really obvious as it turned out to be in the picture on the right. So if you can't repair it and there's still a scar, you probably don't want to use that canvas in an exhibit. You might have to just repaint that portion or something. So please be careful and don't use, poorly manufactured canvases. That's
So you,
the best
you don't
way.
recommend those packs?
No.
3-pack.
No, I don't, because when I bought them, there's usually 2 or 3 that are warped, or sometimes they're not even square. So, they're off squares. So they're made by machines by the zillions, and there is no quality control. So you get what you pay for. If you pay a little bit more, you get a better quality canvas, you get a better quality wood in the frame. And the idea is that you purchase the best possible materials to make your art that you can afford. And if you can only afford the packets of canvases, then okay, but don't use the warped ones. And just do the best you can. But we shouldn't see warped canvases hanging on walls for Sunnyvale Art Club exhibits, because it reflects on all of us. So just be careful with that. Now, let's talk about hardware. At the Art and Wine Festival and at the Santa Clara Festival and art exhibit, in 2019, we saw a lot of artwork that was hung with some very creative hardware. It's nice to see artwork that has been attached to the frame properly. And they make these offset clips that are really handy. They're very inexpensive, and they come in different heights, so that if your canvas sticks out a lot from the frame, you can use one of the taller ones and you screw one side into the canvas and the other side into the frame. But you have to be careful, because if your frame has a sculpted side and part of it is narrow and part of it is thick, you have to make sure that you're screwing into the thicker part of the frame. Otherwise, your screw will come through the frame, and that's not good. So keep that in mind when you're attaching your canvas, and perhaps try to find the best screws you can find that are also the shortest and not too big around, so they're not real fat, because those will split the wood. You might have to draw a pilot hole with a drill, just a little bit in with a small drill tip, just to get it started, so that when you're screwing the screw in, it doesn't split the wood. Once the wood is split on the frame or on the canvas stretchers, it's going to continue splitting. So if that happens, remove the screw and then put some Elmer's glue in there, let it dry, find a new spot, okay? But if it's visible from any part of the painting that can be seen, that will be a problem, and you don't want that to show where people and potential buyers will see it. Oh, these points that I'm showing, they're like little clippy points. Those are really good when you have a shallow canvas that you're putting watercolor art in with a mat. It's not really wide, and it goes on the back, and you screw it, and it just sort of provides pressure against the backboard. So there's when you're looking at the watercolor canvas from the back, it's the backboard, it's the artwork, it's the mat. So it gently presses against them to hold them in, and usually you use a minimum of 4, depending on the size of the canvas. It's really, it's a I don't know. It's not always a good idea to use brads and nail them into the side because you can scrape the backboard and sometimes even dent the artwork on the other side of it if you're too handy with the hammer. So it's best to use a clip that will hold it down. You can purchase a staple gun like the one pictured, and it will have these little framers points that are like little flat knife looking things, and they slide into the wood and they hold the frame on. The bad part about those is if you want to take your artwork out, you bend them up to get the artwork out, and a lot of them break off. So you would have to continually replace them with new ones. So, I mean, it works and it's good, but the stapler is kind of expensive, so it's an investment. These clips that I show at the bottom are the devil's tool to put somebody's eye out. You attach the little pointy part into the canvas, and then you clip it over the back of the canvas frame to, no, I said that backwards. The pointy part goes into the frame, and then it pushes down over the canvas stretcher, and it tucks in under the side. And it's not so good because these bend. They don't always fit the width of the canvas frame. And when they're jiggled around and stuff, they can become dislodged and they can fly away. They can cause damage. I've had one in my house just decide to pop off the back of it was leaning against the wall backwards, and it just decided to pop off the frame and went flying across the room. And that's not the only place, but they're not stable. And we don't recommend that in fact, we really don't want you to use these. You can use them at home, wear protective eyewear, but don't use these when you're exhibiting in a local venue or an art show, because these are just not good for, they're just not safe. So we don't recommend them. And the next slide.
Maybe?
Yeah.
There was a framers, there was another one, a framers points. So, when you have a very small canvas, let's say 8 by 11, like 11 by 8, the height. So the framers point, can you use that because it's so small? Or
Yes, if you can get the stapler inside the canvas, you don't even have to get it all the way inside. But if it's a narrow canvas, usually when you're framing a masonite board in a frame or watercolor or other paper, and you're using the backboard behind it, these are really good for holding them in place. And you'll see these a lot in pre-framed art in stores. So they're good for that.
But not the framers point, correct? The one with,
yes,
is that the same? That's this.
The framers point are used in that stapler.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, I don't see how you would push them in there by hand or with a screwdriver or something. You'd have to have a lot of strength in your forearm to push those in.
Okay.
So they actually are used with the stapler. And I think those staplers run about between close to $30. But if you're going to be doing a lot, like if you have a lot of watercolors or a lot of things that you're going to be framing, it's a good investment. So now we're going to talk about attaching the frame. No, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about attaching the hardware to the frame to hang. So there are different types of hardware that are acceptable to use. What you want is something that is flush, that won't poke out from the back of the frame, that will mar the wall that it's hanging on, because we don't want to damage the walls that we show our art on any more than they already are. And I don't think it matters at the bean scene, but other places really do have some nice walls. So we want to make sure that they're flush. So these D rings are very popular. They're very inexpensive and you can buy them anywhere. And they screw in, you just need one screw into the back of the frame on either side, and so that you can attach your wire across. if you want to use something like the steel 2-hole wire hanger hook, those are really good for larger pieces of art. They're heavier pieces of metal, and they usually hold a lot more weight. So you want to make sure that the wood can support this. So if you've got a big piece of art, it should have a good well, never mind. Anyway, it's for heavier pieces of art, like larger paintings. The offset clips that I showed you before that you can attach your artwork, your canvas to your frame, are also good for framing. You can take these little offset hooks, and this is especially good if you're hanging a canvas without a frame. You put you hold it like an S shape, and you attach the top of it to the canvas stretcher, and then you attach the wire to the bottom portion. It's hard to show you because you can't see me doing this. But you can use that when you're not using a canvas with a frame. So it's also good for thick gallery wrapped canvases, like the 1.5 inch to 3 inch wide canvases. So you can use these, and these hold a lot of weight. So these are good for also, but you need to remember to drill pilot holes to prevent split wood in the back of the canvas stretcher bar, probably more so than for a frame, because that wood is always kind of it's very soft pine sometimes and becomes brittle if it's not kiln dried correctly. So we don't know how it was dried. So we usually try to take some extra precautions with that. So now that you have your hooks on your frame, let's go to the next slide. So you did it right, but you decided when you got home that you have another canvas and you have these lovely little sawtooth brackets and you're going to use one of those. That's great at home. I got to tell you, for me at home, when I'm hanging my canvases, I just put a nail in the wall and hang my canvas on it. I don't even use wire, but that's my house. And I don't care if it falls off and clocks somebody in the head. It's my house. But if you're using these sawtooth brackets to hold your canvas to a wall for a Sunnyvale Art Club venue or an exhibit, these things are just not, the saws on the teeth, they're not deep enough to hold on to a hook. So they're easy to fall off. Sometimes they get bent, and they're just not adequate for what we need them for. So please don't use them. And they come in all different types, but they're not safe, not to the degree of safety that we need. So we ask you not to use those. You can have those hanging and then add the wire for the art exhibit, but anyway. Don't use eye hooks. Don't buy eye hooks. Don't need eye hooks. Leave the eye hooks at the store, and if you bought them, take them back. They are not good for hanging artwork because the little the threads on the screw portion of the eye hook are too small and too close together to do an adequate job of holding into the wood. They will pretty much make a hole, and after your artwork has been hanging for a while or you've moved it around, it turns into a hole instead of attaching and holding like a regular screw would. And on top of that, if they're put on the outside of the frame or the canvas, they will mar the walls. We just don't approve those for artwork in our venues. And if you want to use them anywhere else, that's fine, but please don't use eye hooks. I'll come into your house and get you. No. Anyway, okay, so there are other hardware choices, and I didn't want to take the time to include photographs of all of them, but just make sure that they hold the wire securely and they attach to the frame so that they're not going to come out. and they're not going to cause a problem. That's what we want. So for the next slide. All right. There are a lot of things that we saw at the 2019 Santa Clara exhibit and the Art and Wine Festival last year that made me wonder, well, shoot, I do stuff like this too at home, but I don't want my artwork to be hung with strange materials when I'm at an exhibit or a local venue. I saw pipe cleaners. Don't use pipe cleaners to hold your art. Those are not, wire is wire, okay, but it's not the right wire necessarily. So you need to get picture hanging wire. They sell it on Amazon, they sell it at Michael's, they sell it everywhere. It's not very expensive. I advise you to buy a 100-foot spool of wire that'll hold up to 100 pounds because I don't think your art's going to be any heavier than that. You're going to use it eventually. It's only going to cost you about maybe $10 or $12. And if you can, and you're ordering online, try to get the little crimping clips that go with them, because then you don't have to worry about tying knots with your wire and poking your fingers with the ends of the wires. They're just little sleeves that go on, and they're really helpful, and I recommend those. Don't use craft wires of any type. There are a lot of wires that you would buy for other craft projects and stuff, but they're just not acceptable. A good rule of thumb is to bend it back and forth and bend it back and forth several times. And eventually, if you can break it, it's not going to be good for hanging your artwork because it's just too brittle. So make sure that you're using the proper kind of wire. Don't use jewelry wire. Don't use soldering wire. We saw soldering wire at the Art and Wine Festival. It's nice stuff for soldering, but it's just not made to hold up weight. So don't use it. Copper electrical wire is brittle, and you just don't use that. Don't use nylon cord or any kind of monofilament unless you have a crimper to smash it on with, because it's not going to stay in a knot. It's just not able to hold on to itself. It's too slick because it's a monofilament, and it won't stay tied or knotted on your D-ring. So we don't recommend that. They also stretch with time. So what may be a really tight wire turns out to be a very long wire, but it's not a wire because it's a monofilament. So we don't recommend that. So please don't use that. Don't use clothesline or rope of any kind, or twine or string or embroidery thread. Use wire, because these things will fray, they will break. No twisty ties. Just be really careful when you're hanging your artwork to use the best materials you can afford. If you're in a pinch, you can always call somebody in the art club. We all have wire of some sort, and we'll be happy to help you out in a pinch. So when you're tying your wire to the D-ring, you want to wrap around it at least 1, 2, 3 times. Just wrap the end around it. Make sure, first of all, that your wire goes across the width of your artwork. So if your artwork is 20 inches across, make sure your wire is 20 inches across. You're going to put your hand out and you're going to add that much more wire to the end. So you have 20 inches plus a fist and a fist, whatever that is. My hands are big, so we're talking about another 6 inches on either side. So the width plus 12 inches. And that extra portion is the part that you will use to attach to your D-ring and put it in a knot and wrap the excess around, but very neatly, so that it doesn't look like a mess when you're finished. In order to make sure that your wire does not show after it's hung, so that it's not too low and the wire, you can see the wire on top of the canvas, make sure that when you pull on it, it only goes up to the very bottom of the canvas frame. So if you look at the photograph on the side, you will see somewhat that if you pull it up, it should not be any taller than that frame. And just about at the top of the canvas stretcher bars is a good place for that wire to go. If your canvas is small, you might want it to be a little bit tighter. So the picture on the bottom shows it being a little bit tighter. But remember, it's going to hang higher on the hook. So keep that in mind.
I have a question, Mary.
Sure.
So when you in the galleries, when all the canvases come and let's say there is like a top line where you want to hang, but now because the length of the wire will decide where your top of the line of the canvas will come.
Right.
So is that like people, do they change? Like, is that a way that like you maneuver the wires and make it longer, or you generally don't do that ever? Because when you put the D-ring and you crimp it, you cannot change the length of that wire. That means it's permanent there. So what happens that it's not in the same line because the length of the wires are not the same. Do you get it? Like what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. I don't know what they do in galleries. I imagine they have very strict rules about hanging.
Yeah, because I don't know how much like length, like when let's say we choose to put the D clamp at 1/3 or like the little bit top level, it's not in the middle, but it's in the 1/3 a point. But then how long the wire length should be? It should be all the way to the top of the edge of the canvas, or it should be the middle, the way it showed, or the third one, which is tight.
If you see the second picture,
Yeah.
they're holding it up to it should come up to just about the bottom of the frame on the canvas.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be 1/3 down. If you're at home and you're preparing your art for hanging, do a test and hang your art or attach your D-rings about, I don't know, I always do about 6 inches down from the top of the frame.
I thought it was standard was 1/3 of the canvas.
If your canvas is leaning out after it's hung, that's too low. It doesn't matter if it's 1/3. I hung art that was 1/3 down, and it hung out, especially on the panels at the art exhibit. So I would hang them higher. I would attach the D-rings about 6 inches from the top. You just want to make sure that it's not going to lean out, because you don't want your painting looking at people's feet. Very judgy.
So if the canvas is only 12 inches high, then
okay. Well, keep that in. Okay. If it's a larger canvas, you just have to figure out what will make your canvas sit flush against the wall. And for me, I can eyeball it by the size of the canvas. I've been doing it for so long, I just eyeball it and I just put them where I know that it'll be flush. I just want to make sure that it's not too low so that it leans out. It's usually 1/3 from the top, but that's not, it depends on the type of frame and how heavy the frame is too.
Mm-hmm.
But for some art, like smaller pieces, you might want it a little bit taller. I mean, a little bit up higher. You just have to work with it. I can't give you all the answers because I don't know. I only know what works for me.
Okay.
So, I always say 1/5 of the way down on like outside canvases because
no, I'm at a Zoom meeting, but I don't need to. And I can
because it will it will make sure that it's flush against. If it's a heavier canvas, you might want it a little bit higher. I mean, not a heavier canvas, but a heavier frame on the canvas, a little bit higher, a little bit lower. You just have to work with it.
Yeah, just to add on that one, if it is too small of a canvas, 3x3 or 4x4 or something of that sort, and you're actually putting the D-ring, like literally the 1/3 or anything of that sort, it will not work.
Right.
It will actually stoop forward.
Mm.
So
right.
I would suggest try hanging that piece at home and then bringing it to the show.
Right. You're just going to have to work with it. And if you can't, if it's like an odd shaped thing, like a piece of wood or an odd shaped canvas, we'll make an exception for that. if it's something that just a wire won't allow it to hang straight, we'll work with you on that to try to find some way to hang it so that it stays level and straight. So we're not going to tell you you always have to use a wire and D-rings. There may have to be a different solution for that. Like if you're painting on masonite and you don't want to frame it, we'll have to figure out a way to do that. I take a piece of wood, a frame board, and I cut it about 1.5 inches shorter, 2 inches shorter than the masonite. I glue it to the back of the masonite with contractor's adhesive, or like something like tough as nails, and it will glue it down and hold it. I mean, it'll hold it, through the apocalypse. And then I also add another piece down toward the bottom so that it's going to hang level apart from the wall. So you have the wood behind it. I can attach my D-rings and my wire to that. But I can't attach a D-ring or anything else for that matter to the back of the masonite by itself.
Yeah.
Because it just isn't, I would tear it up. So I always use that. It's a good idea to frame them, but if you can't, you might try that board on the back. There are other hanging thingies that are sold that are for things like masonite and canvas board. And if you have to, you can use those as long as they attach to the hanging hook, and they have to be securely attached to it so that it doesn't wiggle around and so that it can't pop off. So you have to be really careful about that. So, but if you have questions, you can shoot me an email and we can work out a solution for how to hang your weird shaped artwork. Any questions?
I always assumed that because in the library show, loose wire, I understand what you're saying, because when the loose wire, the paintings lean and it doesn't look good.
Right.
But I always assumed that the tighter the wire, the better and stuff. But I don't know if that's true. But
yeah, it is true. But you don't want it to hang so high on the hook that it's, there's no room for artwork above or below. Mm-hmm. Now we can move with the Velcro. We can adjust the hooks better than with the hanging wire, the hanging metal thing, the metal hardware stuff. So
mainly, Mary, on the panels, it was hard because a lot of frames were bigger and we had to change the sizes of the wire. And so you cannot twist, is that a way that these wires can be twisted to make it shorter? I mean, I'm just curious that because we had to do all those adjustments. And what happens when you have very tight,
Right. That's what happens when you hang it too low and you've made too much wire, you put too much wire in it so that it's going to hang way up above the canvas. I guess we'll have to just twist it around, make it fit, or hand it back to the artist and ask them to repair it. I don't like getting poked by the wire, so I'm not really happy when I have to make an adjustment for somebody.
Yeah.
So, and if they're using crimpers, they're not going to be able to remove it, or change it.
One of the good things is once this talk is put on video, anytime we have an art show, we can always repost this video to remind members whenever they do a show and stuff, because I think this will always be because there will always be new members and stuff. So, once you and Ish are finished and stuff, and this becomes a video that we can post and stuff, this is a video we can always repost anytime there's another show.
Well, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Also, I think we should have, this is a great slides. These slides are, even though they are very basic, they are detailed and with all the information, I think we should have them on our website as resources, and also on our Facebook page. As I think there are many tabs, maybe we can create that is resources for the artist. Because
I am planning to add them to the files very soon.
I think it's a great idea because these are beautifully documented all the info resources for the framing, so I really,
If you use those hangers with the little hooks in it on our canvas or screens, then doesn't matter. You change the hook to match the canvas or the wire. You can raise it up and down on that little hook. If you don't use those ones with the Velcro, then you don't have that problem.
Right.
I mean, you can just put the hook where you want it.
That's true. You mean the Velcro hooks?
If you don't use the Velcro hook, if you're using the metal hangers, then you can put your hook that you're hooking the wire on anywhere you want on that strip.
Yeah.
And you don't have a problem where you're hanging it.
Although if you wired the canvas too low, too far down on the canvas, it's still going to lean forward on the metal rods.
I'm not saying that's not true, but I'm just saying you don't have to adjust the wire. You adjust the hook.
Right. That's a good idea.